Well, here we are at Moesgaard Museum in Aarhus, Denmark. And for me, this was a night at the museum. And I'm going to tell you that there were so many unusual things that happened here that I don't know, I couldn't fully explain. But anyhow, I'll take the glasses off for now, and we'll talk about that later. Oh, maybe I'll just keep them off completely. So let me tell you, in all seriousness, sometimes we go to different places. People don't know who we are. We're looking around. And sometimes we are thinking that we're the observer, but at times it feels like they're observing us. And so the paranormal that happened here at the Moesgaard Museum is something that really stood out to me, not to mention that there was a lot of very strange synchronicities that happened. And we, just thought we were going to the museum. We walked in, and by the way, we came in during the day. It looks like the night while we're inside. But I will say that it was strange. And the reason why I called it a night at the museum is because it's very similar to that show that we watched, The Night at the Museum. There's about 3 movies, and the museum comes to life at night as you walk around. So let's begin with what I did see and some of the things that happened. Not to mention that this is a fantastic museum. I highly recommend anyone go and visit and take their time to walk through all the different stations. They literally start off with the beginning of what many people find is an interesting time period, and that is Atlantis. Now, what's fascinating about Atlantis is that mysterious civilization that has brought imagination to the early human experience outside of the early caveman experience, which we are often told to hold on to, instead of thinking that we came in intelligent, we came in evolved and knowing, and we came in figuring out how to bring in all sorts of technology, expanding and building a city or a civilization for that matter. So we're learning, we're growing. But did we or did we not evolve out of nothing? I mean, I guess that's something for people that are more qualified, I guess, than I am. People that understand levels of history, paleontology, early civilization research, and the type of things that people, that curators and those that study artifacts, archaeology, will be more mindful of. But this is where the table turns. We're going to talk about time travel. And when I came to this museum, my eyes started to open up, and we saw something very interesting. So let's take a look at it. So this is the exterior of the building. And the first thing you notice is that they were very, very mindful of the outside and how to blend in with nature. Here is Atlantis 3,600 years ago. They also refer to it as Santorini. But I don't know, there's so many types of thought on this. Now, this is one of the shows that we do. I would definitely encourage that people go back and watch this show about Atlantis with Peter the Insider. So we're not just talking about Atlantis, we're jumping ahead into Stargate Atlantis at this point. Okay, so here is our experience. We immersed right into what was going on in the museum, and this is sort of a visual history. Okay. And that's probably Atlantis. That's exactly what happened with Atlantis. There was an explosion. I remember seeing it. I talked about it in my book, The Seer of Violets in the Grass. And it was a problem with technology. At a later time. This was interesting. It looked like a saucer ship, didn't it? And I was a little fixated on it. And on top, it has this pattern, but tell me if it doesn't remind you of the Umbrella Corporation a bit. I thought it was quite interesting. Pattern's just changing. It becomes a little mesmerizing. The room's dark. Sitting there watching it. Watching things build, deconstruct. The little mounds on the outside. And then I began to look around. Oh, this is really interesting. Turns green again. Sigrid had little stories of different people that were within their history. And there you see the different types of crowns that they wore. Kind of remind me of Sigrid. There's some long hair. I felt a little, connected to it in a way. And of course, we have all these Viking images. These are like silhouettes. It was really cool, but you could just sit there and observe day in the life there. When it comes down to it, humans all need to know how to take care of themselves and under any type of circumstances. But the biggest part is community and is making sure that get along well with those that you are interacting with, and that someday you may need them, because you can't do everything by yourself. Some people have been able to do that, but can't do that all by yourself. And there's so much to just take in here. So up to this point, it feels somewhat normal. I'm observing and watching and kind of wanting to step in there and experience this with them. And of course, anytime you have something good, there's a point where you need to protect and defend. Because someone that doesn't want to, work as hard that might come in and want to take, or has a different view of what they deserve or don't deserve. Here are some of the images that they had around the museum. It's beautiful, isn't it? Oh, and let's wait here for a moment. This is a bog man that they had pulled out of the bogs. And, you could see that the body is still sort of intact. And it's kind of like a mummy. And I remember walking into this room and there were these two men sitting there. And it felt ominous. It felt very, very like as if the energy, the spirit was still there. And these two men were taking it in, just kind of you know, feeling that there's something else. So it's like this mummy is here, and that energy is permeating throughout the museum, and you always feel the presence of this mummy throughout the museum. So I thought that was quite fascinating. Here's some other images. Can you imagine wearing a helmet like that? And some of their, that was actually an instrument or a horn. Now this right here, I can't help but think that reminded me of the Codex Giga. And that was pretty, I mean, we could put them side to side so you could see what it is. But there's horns and the tongue sticking out, but there's like a woven point of it, which, you know, is that Celtic style that you see. But clearly the size and the outstretched arms and, well, we'll show you the side-by-side image of the two. And for those of you who don't know who the Codex Giga is, it's actually considered like a devil type of creature, something that you don't tamper with, and something that was in this book that has been carefully protected for many, many years, hundreds of years maybe, and has been moved from, I think it was Slovakia or Czechoslovakia, and then I think it might have gone to Sweden. Okay, this man. All right, this is when it got really weird. So that morning, before we traveled out to the museum, we had breakfast, and there was a man that looked identical to this man sitting across from us, and he kept looking over at us, and which made him stand out even more. So when we stepped into this room, we took a step back, and it was very unnerving. And it's interesting, he's sitting there, it looks like he's holding a glass of wine or something, but it was really very surreal, very strange. No, did it get up and move like in the movie A Night in the Museum? No. But did it feel eerie? Yes, very eerie. And I definitely felt the presence. And so whatever that was, I thought there's something going on. So this is the same region. It was in another town, but the same person, identical in the face. We were looking at this woman, and here again, they're like wax or some other substance that they created. They're, you know, definitely not human, but someone had crafted and created these, we can call them mannequins if you wish. And as we were looking at her, a woman walked in with her exact face, stood behind her, was looking at her, didn't look at me at all, almost acted like I wasn't in the room. And it was a very small quarter. And I was just standing there looking at, and I started to freak out a little bit because it was her face with shorter hair. She had her hair styled shorter. It was slightly below the ear, and she was moving around. And then she left, and I was like, what do I do? Do I take a picture of her? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't, you know, we talk about mannequins and how Project Mannequin, Peter has been talking about lately. Project Mannequin is a project that they initially wanted to take these people, super soldiers and people that had abilities, take them into some kind of cryo chamber. The problem is when they had awakened from the cryo chamber, they didn't necessarily have the same abilities any longer. And so Kruger came up with the idea to put humanoids into mannequins. And I had that experience of being seeing the mannequins multiple times. I had someone tell me that they had a ship. I looked at their ship years ago. For those of you who don't remember, Max Steele, I said to him, Max, I said, I think it's really weird, but your people that are on that ship are mannequins. And he said, no, they're not. And I said, well, they're not moving. They seem very stationary, but I could hear them talking, but they weren't moving their lips. So the idea of these beings are having a soul that's being stored inside of a mannequin, and then they started to put them into dogs. Well, here's the backstory. Peter said that Kruger came up with this idea to preserve the souls for special projects, and this is part of the super soldier program, not necessarily every person in the world. And what happened is they decided that things weren't working out correctly, so they abandoned the project, and then Monarch took it over, and then things started to go really bad. What I think happened is that I was experiencing with that man before, and this woman was related to a project of Monarch Solutions. Now here we go again. Wasn't looking for it, but when I walked through this museum, I said, there is Arn again, which is Anthony Zender. And we had an ACIO records where there was a validation, and now we know how it happened. Anthony Zender, during the 88-year mission that we did, we all kind of went in different directions, but he in particular went back and spent time with the Knights Templars. And Arn was Swedish. And you could see that he looked just like Arn. There was a lot of similarities and also interests. So they show Arn at the age of 12 years old, and that was in this museum. So little Arn is 12 years old and the son of Arn the Trader. And we follow him through Aarhus and on his first adventurous voyage to Kapang in Norway. And there he is. So there is another hint of something else that's going on here, that we were directed to come to this museum in particular. And this is something that people should definitely look at. In my opinion, Anthony Zender is one of the strongest arguments for time travel of the people that we have met, because it does literally show up. And I have had multiple people show up in different time periods and incidences like this, but I thought this was something that we should take note of, and it's all very, very interesting. This is the Viking age. And what happens is you go through this museum and there's all these different phases of time. Remember, I said we started with Atlantis, and now we're going into the Viking age. I mean, the Vikings were predominant, but it's the civilization that we saw, that point where we were looking at the silhouettes. This is an amazing time period of Odin and Loki and Thor and many of these powerful beings. But I will say, because I don't believe they're human, and the connection to Odin is still very prominent today. And the last time I had a strong visual of him was in Iceland. So he has not strayed very far from this beautiful culture that was created until you see later on Christianity had changed it. And am I anti-Christian? No, but some people, had their own belief systems and they didn't need the assistance or change. That's my opinion. Some people may disagree. But it was a rich culture and they worked well together. And just like any culture, there's good and bad. But for right now, that's what we're looking at. And this is the region where all of it was flourishing. Here's some more of the Viking exhibit. They tell the story about Aarhus and Arn. This is the Randlev woman. We didn't see anyone that looked like these other characters aside from Arn, but I thought, you know, here again, this is a part of the history, and there's also some symbology here. This man's face, or a man's head, on this snap-tune stone with a striking mustache and fine locks of hair depicts the god Loki. And so here is Loki, as we mentioned, who lives in the fire. Not all gods are deviant or trying to control everyone, but rather are quite playful, similar to the way we are. And as I said, some of them are extraterrestrials. We always talk about the Emerthers having a good sense of humor. There are many good ones that have been here to help us. And when I say gods, it's not like, oh, let's all worship him, but pretty much understanding that each culture has something that was honorable to them, or a group of beings that help them throughout their civilization. And so there's levels of respect and love and happiness, or that was affiliated with it. And sometimes it twists and they take those beings, maybe they're benevolent in the beginning and then they do bad things. And I think some of the sacrificial stuff that happened during this time or this culture may or may not have been ushered in by Odin or Loki or any of the other, or Thor. I don't really know. I don't feel that it's in alignment with it, because that usually goes along with some of the other darker beings, that some of them are still around, where they're still looking for human sacrifices. So it's a tough subject. I know that some of you will say, yeah, you know, these are pagan. Well, all cultures have levels of paganism, and even, you know, the early teachings, even biblical teachings, talk about sacrificing humans. So, and I'm not saying that, you know, like that whole thing of Abraham's first son, and was asked to sacrifice his first son, which he didn't have to in the end. But it's the whole idea. And you understand that there's some of these stories have been passed down for a long time, and the world goes through many changes in suffering, in hardship, and sometimes infiltrated by other cultures. So it's really hard to tell what the original source was and type of worship, but I just thought I'd fill that part in. I just wanted to point out something quickly. I want to show a comparison of this image of Agamemnon from one of the ancient Greek time periods, and just to show the similarity in the appearance, to show that they're similar people, that somehow through time they are connected, as well as their style of artwork, as well as the same beings, these same, if you want to call them gods or not call them gods, just visitors here on the planet that are here as protectors or tricksters or what have you, in this case because it's Loki. Then you will see he's not a devil, he's not like really evil. There's a difference between a trickster and someone who is evil. The trickster is here to teach you something. So look, in this whole other culture, he was the king of Mycenae, who commanded the Achaeans during the Trojan War. So many of you know about Troy. And now look, Isn't it interesting that Troy happens with someone that is depicted similar looking to Loki, and how the lessons of the Trojan horse has carried on all the way into our present reality, or our present time period. Just that beautiful blue color, reminiscent of Vikings again. And look at this, and this is what I was talking about, where you have another group of people that come in, and at that time Christianity was heavily enforced, and the Scandinavian people were heavily proselytized. And so they didn't have just one cross here, but you could see there's an array of crosses upon crosses upon crosses. And it was a little overwhelming when we went into this room. They even have them on the floor. When you have a society that lives a certain way for thousands of years, and then suddenly you're forced to change your belief system, because I don't think this was revelation. I think most of it was forced through war and domination. And so they won, but you could see the imprint that they left. Yes, they'll obey, they'll be Christian, and they'll change their belief system, but it feels like it was forced or contrived. And someone can disagree with me. Maybe there's people from that region that disagrees with me, but if you look at the history, it was not something that came naturally. It was not organic. They were mighty sailors. They traveled a lot farther than people realized. They were great shipbuilders, and they weren't afraid of anything, really, it seemed. They had some kind of mission. I'm not sure why they would go into other nations like that, and I know that they had many quests to cross the ocean and got into battles and wars. I'm not really sure what their actual mission was, if they were looking to bring back some of the spoils or what have you. I never fully understood, but I knew it was definitely a hard life. And with that hard life came diseases, sicknesses. I like that they didn't leave that part out, because that definitely decimated the population on many occasions, including most recently, only a few years ago. We could think about, some of these past plagues and flus that we were finally feeling what it felt like. This is where you could see things start to get dark. Imagery, the heaviness. It looked like rocks in there, or skulls. I'm not really sure what was in there, but it was death. But yet they stayed somewhat whimsical. And there's the man hanging on the cross again. You could see it, trying to get through, trying to understand, trying to walk the walk. And you do see this, the Templars. The Templars picked up that cross and took on that mission. And that shadow there was like a Templar. And they were there to serve and protect. We start getting into Hieronymus Bosch, and here again Peter said Anthony Zender was connected to Hieronymus Bosch. And you see here's some Celtic artistry. And there's death. and Christianity. And this is just like the Bosch Museum in the Netherlands, with a strange view of hell. This is one of the features at the Moesgaard Museum. It's an early man, some 300,000 years ago, from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco. And it was reconstructed so people could see how he would look, and that's displayed. There's a full body display in the Moesgaard Museum in Denmark. And I mean, it's very engaging. You can see it looks very lifelike even there. And it says the best prehistoric museum in Denmark, which I agree. And people were saying some things, you know, the guy is older than our most recent common ancestors from the opposite side of Africa. I'm not a geneticist, but that makes me think he might not be related to any modern humans, at least not closely. And I think he's referring to you because of the age, 300,000 years old. That's a long time ago, but yet he looks, I mean, he just looks like he could be one of us for sure, you know. And I think, you know, people were having fun with it and saying, you know, he looks like a fitness maniac from Aussie, you know, referring probably from Aboriginal appearance. And I think people really liked him. But I thought this was interesting. Someone called him Morpheus. And one of the things that I'm thinking of is that we're going to get into some of the other images. These are his feet. You see, you know, he lived 300,000 years ago, and there's a location coming from Morocco, and I thought that also was interesting. And you see, you know, some of these cavemen type of guys, but also like the ones from A Night at the Museum, you know. And we have this from the series of 3 movies, but the cavemen are, you know, people just enjoyed watching them and trying to imagine what they were actually like. And in the museum, in the Moesgaard Museum, here's one image, and then there was also this woman who looks very close to one of the super soldiers, or, you know, one of the people that Peter and I did a session with. And so my thoughts were, is this actually early man developing, or is this man traveling back in time as time travelers and showing up there? And then because of the environment, and there's a lack of shelter, especially if they're in Denmark or Sweden, and being exposed to extreme cold or any type of environmental issues, they would change. They would become a little bit more, I don't know, worn out from the weather and rougher looking. But it's just an idea that, you know, time travel is also another component to this. So getting back to time travel and the idea of Anthony Zender traveling back from our 88-year mission, or any one of our soldiers from Unit 374, or maybe another soldier from, or other soldiers or time travelers from Project Ibis. And they travel back in time. Anthony ends up with the Knights Templars. But then what if he keeps going further back? All the way back. Thousands of years back. And could he be amongst some of the people in this museum that they're talking about, or the history of Denmark? But he originally wasn't someone who migrated or traveled, but actually it wasn't organic, it was through time travel. But there is a a bit of a historical mark that's left. And then it confuses everyone. They don't know exactly what happened and how people were here, and how this could explain some of the differences and things that they're discovering that don't seem to fit. It's kind of like the storyline of the finding a Swiss watch in China. It was a Swiss watch ring that they found in China. So at that time period, it was buried in some kind of stone, so they had carbon dated it and then discovered that it didn't make any sense. They didn't have that type of technology, those type of watches, and the Swiss company that made it didn't exist at that time. Time travel exists. I've talked about this in my books. And the more people come to realize it, the easier it will be, and we can better understand too how certain people are showing up in different areas, and it's not necessarily because they lived there first, but because they time traveled there. But there were others around at the time, or no one was around at the time in that area. We just need to be more open-minded and figure it out. The soldier. We're getting into the soldier of Denmark in 1991. Men over 18 must appear for a military training assessment. Women can volunteer. In 2024, just over 1/4 of recruits are women. Just like the old Vikings, the women are getting into battle. Remaining in the army and going to war is a voluntary decision. Young soldiers are often driven by a desire for adventure and a wish to test themselves. The objective of the armed forces has shifted since the 1990s. Once primarily concerned with protecting the country's borders, today military personnel is also deployed outside Denmark. The aim of these international operations is strategic, the part of global politics, often on ideological grounds. The soldiers' equipment is constantly evolving in a race with potential adversaries on the battlefields of the future. With the tensions that we have right now going on with Ukraine and Russia, I know that Sweden, Denmark, Norway are feeling the heat, and it's pretty much knocking on their door. The only thing that separates Sweden from Russia is Finland. And so the borders are close. So this really has a lot of meaning. It has a lot of meaning for those that are right on the front lines. If the war travels past the borders. Just something to think about. And here we are, we have this new word that shows up while we're walking around the museum, and the word is Kriger. And we don't quite know what Kriger means until we get to this point and see that it means warrior. What does a person go through in becoming a warrior? All societies have taboos against killing, but not for those who go to war. Follow 4 warriors across time and place and see how war changes them in their bodies, in training, on the battlefield, and when they come home. But what stood out to me is it sounds so much like Kruger. And those are soldiers, it's Kruger soldiers. It's similar in name and having this deeper meaning. I know some of you have been thinking about Gabriel Kruger. For example, how can someone from the 1800s be influencing in World War II and then also being alive in present day, which he has been seen in present day right now, maybe even like a year or 2 ago in the public. So Gabriel Kruger exists, and I just want to show you another example of this. This is the movie Highlander that came out in 1986, and it is a battle of the immortals. We're not saying that they're gods. We're saying that somehow they found immortality, maybe through a super soldier program, because they always say there can only be one. There can be only one, is exactly how they say it. And they're looking for the fabled prize, which is the ultimate power. Whatever, you know, amongst warriors, there's always a challenge and a battle and something else to look into. But it's sort of another story, or is it? I'm going to show you something else. This individual stood out to me. I've been looking at him for some time and really never had the opportunity to share it. But this character called the Kriger, who's from the Caucasus, from the steppes of Russia. And he has immortality and one of the early people. But take a look at what his real name is. Victor Kruger. He goes by the name of Vidor or Vidor, the Kriger, but Victor Kruger is there. Keith Samples, Konrad Regenko, Count von Kron of Saxonia, and Andrei Kiprov. He's a warrior, former French naval officer, former French naval soldier. So how could he be that? And also a criminal punk gang leader, a barbarian, a Marine, and a headhunter. From what time period? 980 BC. Is it possible that this is a relative of Gabriel Kruger? Why not? Why wouldn't he be a part of the Kriger group? The Kriger, Kruger. And these are some of the different ones. After taking the head of another immortal, the Kriger met Kronos, Silas, Caspian, known as the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Someone like this very likely could still be alive. And part of the reason why there is the current battle right now between Russia and the Ukraine. Continuing travels from 1611 to 1619. I believe, if I'm correct, King James Version is 1611. Yep, King James Bible 1611. So what does that mean? That's the Christianity part of it. That's intertwining with the soldiers and their missions and who they're working for and who they're protecting and who they're going against and who's defending which side. Here's a Korean immortal, Youngdal Kim. The last name Kim is very prominent in that society, but could be related to someone that's alive now. And someone by the name of Brenda Wyatt. There's quite a few names here. But anyhow, let's take a look. He is a psychotic warrior. While Connor was describing as being afraid to live and resenting the isolation his immortality has brought him, the Kurgan was enamored with his immortality. And he had a very famous quote in the end. It's better to burn out than to fade away. And I think even Kurt Cobain quoted that. So that is another extension of Kriger. Just a side note to this, and I think it's really important that you pay attention. I know in the series, in the Highlander series, the Kurgan is depicted as the bad guy, as the guy that everyone wants to see go and they want the Highlander to win. And we don't really know if in fact that is the case, because each warrior can be looked at as either good or bad, depending on which side you're on and depending on who's telling the story. So in this case, the storyteller is behind the Highlander, Connor MacLeod. And that can be the case for every super soldier who people like to demonize and say, oh, that one's bad, that one's good. It all depends on who they were working for and who wins. Because the one who wins is usually that tells the story. So just keep that in mind before you get into judgment and get hung up over the fact that you were afraid of him, that you hated him or disliked this character. The fact is that he was obviously a phenomenal warrior, as were every single one that participated in this competition. And whether or not they actually did die is questionable. Just to mention, in the Night in the Museum is the Night Watchman. The Night Watchman is synonymous with the soldiers. Is what it originally meant, is the night soldier, the soldier that was there making sure while everyone slept that everyone was safe. So there's this strong opposition, and then there's defense, and those in the defense are there to protect. And when we went to the Netherlands, we also found just out of nowhere, we looked and there was a restaurant called The Night Watchman, but in Dutch. And it keeps on showing up as a theme for us in our travels. But here is an image of Kriger, and you see a modern day soldier and then tribal looking soldier. There's looks like a Japanese soldier, and I'm not sure to the right, but it looks like another type of warrior, and all these warriors standing together. And so it just says warrior or Kriger. In the movies, the series The Night at the Museum, you see these miniaturized soldiers battling with each other, and that's exactly what it felt like in this room. And it was absolutely incredible. And so you stand in this room and you're observing as if you're the central point of this battle. And you see the arrows and bows strung and knocking all of these people down as they continue to move forward. And the animation is absolutely amazing. It's kind of really cool to be there. And then you look to the other side and you see the other ones coming up. And they too are falling down and they're running toward with the shields. And then the battle, how it gets dark. Everything turns black, and then there's hand-to-hand combat. Very much like a Templar might have done, or any type of army during that time. And then it goes white, like a mist. And we know we had that strange mist that occurred this year, but look at the mist here. It's almost like the death, the heavy mist floating over the dead bodies and the tragedies of war, the suffering, the pain. Something that many of our super soldiers have experienced over and over again. Here again, there's death. And it's the truth and the fact of lifestyle of things that people have had to undergo in order to protect borders and to thrive and survive. not anything. It would have been nice had this not happened, but it's a fact. And many people, super soldiers, they remember. And sometimes it plays over and over again in their dreams and recalls. And try to understand. For you who are not soldiers, maybe you're scientists, maybe you have other interests, maybe you feel that we should all be in peace. Well, it didn't happen that way. So people are trying to talk about it, express it, and understand it. And I felt that very much in this room. See the look on the face. It's something that they can't erase, a memory, and the chaos that it brings. The serious look, understanding what they were walking into. And you see the uniforms. They still stand at attention, proud, of all different cultures, understanding what it means, what Kriger means. Kriger means warrior. Kruger means warrior. If the room could talk, if these characters would come to life, just like in the night at the museum, how intimidating would that be? You can see their posture and their stance. You can see the looks in their eyes. And it's not just about the weapon, it's the soldier, the one handling the weapon, as simple as a stick. So I guess it's time for me to go now. And I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope it helped you to think a little bit more about time travel. And though we talk about so many things, whether you take it serious or not, I think there's enough people out there that are remembering, and maybe just give them a few moments of your time and consider it. Consider that some of these things are true, and that we're all in this journey together. Disclosure isn't necessarily about fame. It isn't necessarily about talking in front of the government. Disclosure is an incremental step forward in getting the information out for people to understand. Does time travel exist? Yes. Do these programs exist, both good and bad? Yes, the super soldiers exist. Do nefarious corporations exist of the future? Are they doing things that are influencing our society today? Absolutely. And we will continue talking about these things. And it's always nice when I step into a place like this that it confirms some of the things that I already knew, but also opens my eyes to something new. And we should always be striving to learn and to grow and to expand. And the more we grow and expand, the more people will come with us and understand that we are not on this simple journey of life and death, but there's so much more in between. So, thank you for listening. Maybe get together with some friends or family and watch a night at the museum. And talk about the possibilities of some of these things happening. Have a good day.